everyone, and welcome back to a brand new installment of Whiskey Friday Academy. Today we're kicking off a multi-part series transforming our 10-year-old 991.1 GT3 to stay relevant with the more modern GT3s and GT3 RSs. And we're starting with a full suspension overhaul. This is a deep dive, folks, a long and detailed video, but trust me, it's worth it. If you're just here for the install, we've timestamped everything: interior, rear, front suspension. Plus, all torque specs are down below in the timestamps and linked in the description for us visual learners. Let's get started.
So to start things off, you'll need an E12 and a 17 mil for seat removal. The 17 mil is to take the seat belt buckle off, and the E12 is for the bolts that hold the seat down. Just so you know, we've also got instructions for those who don't have a roll bar. Yes, removing the interior would be slightly simpler without it, but it's not a requirement for this install process. Remove the yellow connector under the seat and move it out of your way. If you have a harness, now is the time to tuck the harness belts over the roll cage. For pulling the seats out, you need to be careful because the rails stick out quite a bit from the back. You don't want to catch those on the door. Next up is the rear carpets. Go ahead and start with the rear carpet panel. Scoop your hand from the bottom and pull up. To remove the rear center carpet, first remove both plastic covers by hand or with a plastic pick tool. The center carpet is tucked into the sides of the panels, so lift the center starting from the bottom. If you've got a roll bar, you need to lift and pull it through the top triangular gap in the bar. It's a tight squeeze, but it's doable. Next, remove the foam cover, and just like that, we are done stripping the interior and ready to move on to the rear suspension. Alright guys, grab the tools listed on the screen and put your 991 in the air. You probably saw the oddball tools in the list, and yes, you need them. There is a bolt that was installed backwards from the factory, and if your 991 has seen some miles, it will need all the lubricated encouragement to get some of these nuts and bolts off. Lay those parts on a table and let's get after it. First up is removing the wheels. As you can see, our tech is using a handheld lever arm-based center lock tool. If you'd like to install your wheels like a factory tech and remove your need for a companion with massive calves holding the steering wheel, click the high torque link in the description, or visit our website at DundonMotorsports.com to order yours today. After removing the tires, start with removing the brake duct. Then begin unbolting and remove the rear lower control arm. If you are just installing MCS, you can just unbolt the arm from the knuckle and swing it down. Next up is unbolting the link from the sway bar. Spray some penetrating compound if the link is not cooperating. This is also a good time to check all the bushings, boots, and any other wear items that may have degraded over time as these cars are getting up there in age. Now let's move on to the upper arms. The rear upper arm is pretty self-explanatory. Just unbolt from the knuckle and chassis, then just replace the arm with our rear upper dog bone. Here is a reference between the stock part versus our part. For the front upper arm, things get a little interesting. When producing the 991, Porsche factory installed the chassis side bolt with the head facing the subframe. Because of this, you need to cut off the head of the bolt. Leave the knuckle side of the arm bolted in. This will reduce unnecessary movement during cutting. After the cut, unbolt the arm from the knuckle side and remove the upper arm. Grab the dog bone, new hardware, and replace the stock arm with the chassis side bolt facing away from the subframe. Snug it tight and let's move on to the next step. Before we remove the lower forward arm, we need to drop the sway bar. To do this, we will start with the car's under panels. After the floor panels have been removed, we can now remove the pan and two cross members. Now we can begin removing the sway bar from the chassis. Do not remove it from the mount. We need the bar and the mount removed from the chassis. After getting the sway bar out of the way, you can now remove the lower arm and replace it. Button it all back together and move on to the MCS 3-ways. To start things off, grab your ratchet, pick tool, and let's jump back into the car and begin with removing the PASM connector. It's a little black cable coming out of the top center of the damper. Follow the cable from the damper to the harness. Use your pick tool and carefully press the detent on the clip. Move the cable out of the way and begin removing the top nuts securing the damper. Before hopping out of the car, ensure the cable is actually free. You don't want to fight with a snag as the damper is coming out. Now go back under the wheel well. Unbolt the damper from the knuckle and remove the damper as you feed the cable through. Now, before we install the MCS, we will pass the mic over to Chuck so he can demonstrate how to purge and disconnect the lines from the canisters.
All right, what we're talking about today is MCS shocks and canisters, pressures, installs, lift cups, a lot of little details for assembly, adjustment, handling, care, etc., etc. One of the main things we get questions on is what to do when you go to pull these apart to install the shocks in, say, the knuckle, because the shock goes in here and then the canister line comes out the bottom, so you have to disconnect these. So the correct way to do this procedure, and only do this when you go to assemble them, is first you have to depressurize these, and the little pin on the end of this works just fine. And you just flip it over and you will pressurize. That's probably enough. You don't need to go all the way. And now the quick disconnect will disconnect with one hand. It's fairly easy, and if you need to, these will generally, at least if you're in my case, you can now squeeze them back together easily with one hand. You don't need two hands, you don't need to force it, you don't need to bench 600 pounds or whatever, but now they're disassembled.
Now back to the MCS install. Grab the MCS damper, and as you feed it up, make sure the canister fitting at the bottom is facing the chassis and not the knuckle. Take the proper hardware and snug it up to the knuckle. Grab a second hand and have them lift the damper in place. As they continue to hold, grab the hardware and ratchet down the top hat to the shock mount. Hop on out and get ready to install the rear lower control arm. Heading back to our table, we can now grab the Dundon lower control arm. For installing, our tech found it easier to start with the eccentric bolt first. Before we get to the sway bar end links, now's the time most channels try to farm some likes. But instead, we'd like to know if you'd be interested in a part 2 on the alignment rack. We will dive into how all these parts work together to hold alignment specs nobody else can achieve. If this is something you'd like to see, let us know in the comments below. With that out of the way, let's grab our rear sway bar end link and get her bolted up. The side with the longer bolt attaches to the upper portion of the knuckle, and the shorter bolt goes to the sway bar. Get it snugged up together and grab that torque wrench. For the torque specs, you can see we have them time-stamped and PDF linked in the description. The PDF will go into great detail and tips. It features photos of the parts on the table and on the car. Specs will be in Newton meters and even foot-pounds. If you have any questions, reach out below or give us a call. After getting everything tight, it's time to run those canister lines. Let's leave the car in the air and pass the mic over to the Dundon himself.
All right, back here we have the rear of a 991 GT3. This also applies to an RS, a 992 GT3 and an RS. I'm showing our rear canister line routing. There's two ways to route this. On this particular car, we routed the line down. And we routed along this tension arm, front lower tension arm here. And then up and around underneath with the rest of those lines, because we're going to go into the wheel liner, and I'm going to show that out. The other way I have this routed on another car, again, different, so it depends. I actually have this routed up. However, that car has less droop. It's also a 992 with a later shock, so this fitting is actually up higher. That is different. This is generally the way that we recommend routing most of them. This seems to be pretty good. Doesn't catch, doesn't chafe on anything, doesn't seem to get in the way. I'll show you up under the fender liner in 1 second. So here's the front of that canister line. So there's a couple different ways to go about it. This one right here, you can see it right there. You can route it above and through or underneath. Just who's doing the job. This one, we're gonna add one more cable tie to secure it. Again, just make sure slack's out of it. It's not too much. There's a little bit of movement here, so it's not gonna bind and pinch with suspension movement, and it's not gonna chafe. I'm gonna pull this liner out real quick. All right, now with the liner out, you can see all the rest of the connections in here. So again, there's 2-3 different ways to do this. Some cars are different than others. Depending on how much slack you need inside the car, you can route in here to this lower grommet right here. It's in the car, or some cars we'll actually cut this connection out right here. This little bubble, we'll cut that off. And you slit up with a razor blade, cut the top off, and you can run the line in through there. Again, it really depends on how much slack you have. This all seems to route pretty good. There's kind of no, I don't want to say right or wrong way to do it. Everyone's got a few different ways. So depending, if you don't need as much slack inside, you can pull this out and it'll tuck down better. But this all fits underneath the liner. The wheel liner keeps it tucked out of the way, and it works pretty good. Let me show you and that's just in through the hole there. And then you just have the grommet and you just cut through it. It goes in the body. All right, so inside here, the 991 GT3, canister lines usually just come through underneath the carpet here. This, we just don't have the slack pulled through currently. The canisters, then you come out wherever the roll bar is currently not in the car. We're doing some other work and development and such. We don't have it in here. That's kind of your prerogative, your choice. We're gonna mount them where the customer wants them mounted. On the back here, this is the KW delete. This is where the PASM control unit is. And you can mount, these are stuck down here, double-sided tape on the back of them. And then they all route and they have additional connectors right there. And they come with their end of the harness. And you unplug, you plug that right in right there. And then you can leave the old harness back here and just zip tie it out of the way. That is how this is done on a 991 GT3.
After running the canister lines, we can now move to the front of the car. And just like in the rear, we need the wheels removed, if you haven't so done already, and to keep an eye out for worn bushings, boots, or any parts with uneven wear. You may also notice that some of the parts shown are not factory. These parts are just aftermarket stock replacements, so disassembly will still be the same as a stock removal. Now, unlike the rear, we will begin with the removal of all the front underpaneling. If this is your first time doing this, be aware of debris designed to fall into your eyes. After removing the panels, you'll see it now gives us proper access to the tension and lower control arms. Move over to the wheel well and remove the brake duct. It is held in place by 2 wheel liner fasteners and 1 chassis mounted bracket behind the duct. Head to the knuckle and remove the tie rod end. If it's being stubborn, you may need a ball joint separator tool. Grab a 24mm and 21mm open end to remove the tie rod end from the inner. Unbolt the tension arm from the lower control arm. When unbolting the tension arm from the chassis side, don't forget to loosen the nut next to the tension arm bolt as seen here. Otherwise, you'll run into a possible binding issue. Now let's move to the back of the wheel well and remove the front sway bar end link. And if it's giving you a hard time, don't forget to use some bolt penetrant. Let's move our attention to the chassis side of the lower control arm. Grab a 10mm and 9mm to remove the telemetry sensor from its respective bracket. Don't forget the orientation of the bracket as you will need to transfer it over to the Dundon lower control arm. Before you remove the damper and knuckle, start with removing the brake lines, brackets, and all the sensors attached to the knuckle. Follow this up with removing the lines on the damper used for front axle lift. The goal is to make the knuckle and damper safer and easier to handle during removing and installation. For the caliper, only remove the 2 nuts shown with the arrows. Do not disassemble it like Legos. Upon removing the nuts, slide the caliper off, grab a caliper hanger, and hang it to the chassis out of the way. Moving to the face of the rotor, remove the set screw and set the rotor aside. Quick clean tip. After you remove the rotor, hand twist the center lock back on to reduce unwanted grease as you maneuver around the knuckle. Grab an 18mm and unbolt the lower control arm from the knuckle. Now, get a second hand and have one of you hold the knuckle as the other is unbolting the damper from the strut tower. Let's now turn our attention back to the wheel well. Remove the lower control arm from the chassis, and remember the orientation of the telemetry sensor bracket. Set the lower control arm aside and head back to the knuckle. Unbolt and free the strut from the knuckle. Slide the strut up and out from the knuckle and set it aside. So grab your MCS as we pass the mic back to the Dundon for an in-depth guide to the MCS install.
So in this case, we would now feed the canister line through the shock, through here, through the body, and out the bottom. I'm going to do this real quick. Okay, a few more things to note when you install these. One, this is a common question. This tag, we're going to leave it on for now. I don't take them off till the end. We've had a few guys say, hey, I went to install the shocks and they don't fit through the lower clamp. Well, if you notice, this part of the shock right here is off center, and it's like that on purpose. So sometimes all you have to do is literally just rotate and it will go down. Now down here, see how that was sitting? You have the nub right here. This is offset for the hose on purpose. You need this part of the shock to sit on the machine surface right there, right here. That's how the factory shock is. So you can rotate this and now it's sitting down. Now the rest of this is right here. If you zoom in, you can see there's 2 little holes there in here for a spanner wrench, and then this fitting right here should be centered. Don't look at the hose. This swivels. We're talking the inner swivel piece right here. Should be outward this way on the car. You see how if we rotate this, it moves in. So that should be centered out right about there. And again, there's 2. It's hard to see in here, but there are 2 small black points here for a spanner wrench to go in. But that should be centered out. It should not be touching the knuckle. It should be cleared. Now up here, where the upper pinch is, we have this point on the clamp. I like to move this to the other side. Now how do we do that? Well, we go to move this, and of course now the shock moves down here. So we have to move this ahead of time before it goes together. Now this shock is a non-front axle lift. It's the same thing if it's a front axle lift or not. So we need to rotate this clamp over this way so that it lines up here. That's how we get the correct clamp on this. And then once we rotated that, now you'll realize this is offset down here. So you have to use 2 hands and you grab it and rotate it. So now if done correctly, pinch clamp, this gets the best clamp on it. If it's not perfect, it's not super critical. And then this fitting is now clear here of the body. And that is very important. If this swivel here, right here, is pinched into the body, it is going to leak. You're gonna have a problem, or the shock itself is not gonna be bottomed out in the knuckle. Okay, now the next thing we're gonna talk about is the lift cups. These are the 991 This has this adapter fitting. This fits 991, 718, GT4 RS, 718 GT4, 981 GT4 if you have the optional lift pump setup that we're working on. This fitting here, the silver fitting, this is the adapter for the hydraulic car. So 991.2 GT3 RS, 992 GT3 at RS, 718 GT4 RS all have hydraulic. The rest of the car is 991.1 has air, so we would remove this fitting. These all come with every fitting in them. If you bought a set secondhand, they may not have them and you may have to buy these. So this fitting is very snug. There we go. Once that fitting's out, there's a thread in the top and the hole. This is where the air fitting goes in if you have an airlift car. Now I did these parts separate because I wanted to show how this is supposed to go in here because we've had a few questions. So of course your collar's in here with the shock, and I get that lined up. The lift cup has a pin on each side. One's left, one's right, drivers, passengers. That pin is, when you get these should be assembled in a line this way. That pin is meant to line up right there, and that's to locate. What's that locate? That locates the lift to the inside of the car. This is the inside of the car here. See that? Otherwise, you'll have this rotated incorrectly. Now, right now, where this is at, see how this moves? We're gonna go on this pin real quick here. If we zoom in on this, oop, come on, there we go. It is sitting on that pin. So that means all the way to the car, if we had a full spring stack assembled here, is sitting on that pin. This pin needs to be in that groove right there. See that? Very important. Very, very important. So the other question we get a lot is on these adjustments. This collar, because of the height, we only have 30 millimeters of adjustment here, max, all the way down, all the way up. There's no additional lock ring. This is to counter and hold it, is what these pins are for. Now this set screw in here, there's two of them. There's one there and there's one over here. How that works is once you get your ride height set, there's a wrench in the kit, an Allen wrench. You spin these in and snug them up against the threads. You do not need to reef them down. Don't need an impact gun. Don't use an air ratchet. Don't use an electric ratchet or anything. You just spin them down by hand and just quick snug, and it keeps this from rotating. This should not want to rotate. That just prevents it. In some applications, this is not enough height adjustment based on the spring stack that we've provided. Very rare. It's 1 out of 50 we get. Someone says my car's too high, my car is too low, and we need to adjust. This is not adjustable if you have lift. So we have to change either the mainspring or the tender, preloader, helper spring, pick a term, whichever you want to call it. I'm not going to argue what's what. And in this case, this preloader has 1.25 inch block height when it's solid. It's 1.25 inches. So if you needed to raise the car, but the car was 1/2 inch too tall, 1/4 inch too tall, and you couldn't lower it anymore, let's say these were threaded all the way down here, I would change the tender out for one that's got slightly shorter block height. If it was give or take 1 inch, we might change the mainspring. Again, this is very, very rare. If you run into this, give us a call. We have plenty of options on this. This sleeve on the front strut car is right here on the front. Oh, there you go. This sleeve is going to stop right here at the end of the threads. So when you push this up, this should be seated in the car. And it should just stop right there. That's where it sits in the car. That's where this should be bottomed out in the shock housing, in the knuckle. And then that's where this should sit right at the top. And again, on a lift cup car, front axle lift car, this will sit right on that. And again, watch that pin location.
Setting aside the knuckle with the MCS installed, we can now head back to the table and prep the Dundon lower control arm. Remove the sensor bracket, transfer it over to the Dundon LCA, and hold off on the spacers, unless you know you need more than the +3 mil that is built into the lower LCA. Button up the lower control arm and tighten up the inner LCA to the chassis. Now grab your second hand and have them lift the knuckle and MCS into place as you snug up the MCS to the shock tower. Bolt the lower control arm to the knuckle and let's begin the reinstall, starting with the rotor and that set screw. Go ahead and slide the caliper back on, snugging it back up with the two nuts. Now, grab the front end link and let's address the common mistake folks make during the install. Bolt the link to the knuckle as you would the stock part, and extend the link to match the end link you took off. Next is bolting it to the sway bar, and this is where most stumble. Currently, you are seeing us match the length of the stock link and purposely bolting it to the sway bar as you would the stock part. This is incorrect. As you can see, there is a bind being created at the knuckle to the bearing. So flip it and have the bolt head face the knuckle and skip ahead, unless you are here for Chuck to answer a common FAQ into why we install it facing the knuckle and not the chassis.
I'm going to show quick sway bar end link installation. So something I want to point out with these, this is installed currently on the full soft position, and as you can see, that bearing's articulated quite a bit. It's actually binding slightly. So we actually need to move the rod end to the outside end of the bar to correct this angle. That's what it should not look like, no. Here's the end link moved, less articulation. Now it's on the outside of the bar. This is the correct way to install these front end links.
After getting the end link installed, get the telemetry sensor installed and head back to the table. Grab the tension arm and install it to the chassis side, remembering to tighten the subframe nut we loosened. Bolt the tension arm to the lower control arm and grab the tie rod. If you have installed our tie rods before, you know what to do and skip ahead, as Chuck dives into the specifics with the Dundon tie rod end.
I want to show you our adjustable tie rod. What we changed here is we have a turnbuckle style, so you can just adjust this from this hex point here. You can install here, probably thread this on a little bit further here, and then you leave this the nut locked on the rack, and then all you have to do is loosen the pinch clamp, the two bolts, pretty far till this free spins here, and then you just adjust here with a 22mm wrench. Now to give you an idea how much adjustment you have here, that is our rod end. These are custom made. That shank is 2 5/8, so that's how far it goes. So you have quite a bit more room. Now this does have some shims in it, so a bit of camber, so you could go a bit more if needed. And to give you an idea here, this is the stock tie rod. So it is shorter here. Now we also have this added adjustment. So you can actually run this nut in another 1/2 inch if you want more adjustment. The factory on this car, the tie rod sits about there stock. So we pushed this out quite a bit on this end. But to adjust this, once it's installed, you loosen those two nuts and you spin this with a 22mm wrench to get your desired toe. Then you lock these two nuts back down in this position, the nuts facing forward and up. That way they clear the knuckle. Other types have a pinch bolt on this adjuster, and you still have to adjust from the nut down there. You still have to loosen and adjust the toe here, and then you have the brake duct in the way and the upper brake duct, and you got to take those off. This way you don't have to do that. You just adjust, tweak it, spin it like a turnbuckle, tighten the two pinch bolts down, and you are good to go.
Finishing with the tie rod, we will now install the brake line and sensor brackets, followed by installing the front axle lift back to the MCS. Next, follow the specs linked below and torque everything back up. To conclude this install, we will need some nitrogen and grab the MCS canister lines.
All right, what we're doing today is I'm showing front canister routing lines. Actually, I'm going to show rear here shortly with MCS shocks This is a 991.1 GT3. As you can see here, this applies to all 981, 991s, turbo, GT2, GT3 RS, you name it. This is a 991.1, so it's got the front air lift on it. So it doesn't have the adapter in it. As you can see, the shock fitting, it's on the out for the canister line. And up here, if you see, I got that line going behind the brake duct right here, okay? And then up underneath the wheel liner. I'll show that in just a second. Something to note, I have this wheel turned all the way to the right. So when it's all the way to the right here, I like to make sure this line is up all the way because we're at full droop right here. So I don't want extra slack because it'll get in the way. It can rub, chafe, get caught. So I have it up here. See that zip tied behind the brake duct there? And then got it zip tied here on the body. And underneath the wheel liner here, there's this foam cover because there's just a hole there. So it's kind of plugging the hole to the front compartment there. Not in the front trunk, front accessory bay there. So I'll show that in a second how that routes. This is generally how we route them. If you have a better way, that's fine. If you have another way, a recommendation, this seems to work really good. We seem to have no issues with this. All right, here's the front of the 991 GT3 in the trunk. This is generally where we mount our canisters. We just rivet through on the upper part of the bulkhead. As long as you stay high enough up here, you're not gonna hit fuel tank or anything down in there, and you'll clear it. Okay. We'll usually pull most of the trunk out or some of this to get through here. Back under here, there's our shock line right there through that foam piece. Sometimes we'll cut a little bit of the foam bit away there, and it's just coming through. And then what we do back here on this side, there's that grommet right there. So you gotta be careful here with this. You can't just poke and drill through. You have to remove the grommet from the firewall. And then we'll cut through the foam, raise the blade a couple times, and we'll slit to the outer edge. And then we'll run the shock canister line through it. Then we'll cut a hole through the carpet. We'll usually slit it with the razor blade a couple times, make a couple triangles, feed the canister line through into the trunk. So the other side over here is essentially the same. However, the line comes through up under the plastic. There's no foam on this side over here, but routing through to the grommet is fairly similar. You just have to slit the grommet, a couple triangles, and you can get the line through it. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing. And a few setups. Now what we have here is I just have a generic hard end. Don't use a rubber hose, don't use a tire inflator. You're gonna blow that gauge apart, you're gonna blow the hose apart. So this is a solid inflator only. Quick disconnect, done, that's it. So then we'll just go once it's set here. And we will just go ahead and push and hold it for a second or two. Now see how that levels out a bit and then it comes back? You want to make sure now that's okay. If you wanted a little bit more, we would come to the regulator. I might turn that up a little more here. Now we're there. You notice how you got to hold it for a second or two. You can't just put it in and let it go. Okay, now we got 150. Let's say, hey, I want 120. Well, you just got a Schrader valve you have to undo on the end of this. So we're just going to grab here. Let's say you decided you wanted less. Oh, look at that. Now we're a little low. Well, about. Let's say these are discharged, which again, you should be checking these before track day. Maybe not every track day, but every time you get your car serviced, oil service, whichever, oil change, gear oil, brake fluid, you name it, should always at least be checking these. They do, that is a lot of pressure. They do leak over time. Let's say we wanted to set this down at 120. I'm going to come back to the regulator here. I'm going to spin this down. Now, oh, look at that. Nothing changed. You need to come to the valve here. You need to bleed this in. Spin it back up. zoom back in here. 100, 110, 120 plus a little. That's like 125 right there. So now we're going to come back here, pick up our Schrader valve. There we go. Now you notice the pressure increases and then drops again. That's normal. That's generally how the regulator operation works. But now we have 125 pounds in here. So now let's say I want to bump it back up to 150, because that's where we just normally send these. So there, we're going to do it again. There you go. Some people will say, yes, you can just set the regulator on the tank, use this straight on the canister, which you can. It depends if you want to be able to verify how much pressure is in the canister. I always recommend checking, because if every time you have to fill up these canisters, they're always low. Every time you go to fill it up and you don't check it, and you always have to put nitrogen in, you're just putting nitrogen in. That would be like saying, hey, let's check our tire pressures, and you just shove air to your tire pressures. Well, you're not going to get a regulator to 35, 38 PSI and then go ahead and adjust it. So always check, put these on if you can. Generally try to get the canisters there. Sometimes you can't get them there. Sometimes I will just set it. If I can't get the gauge on, I'll just set the regulator and then just fill it up. But hopefully this helps from here. Spin this, back this off. This closes the valve. And we just unthread and we take this off. And then we are good to go. And again, this applies to 2-way, 3-way, 4-way, any of these that have the external reservoirs. Pretty much that's all we deal with here. We are going to start, we've considered supplying smaller tank setups for everyone that's more mobile than a tank on a cart, and we have a couple other carts over there. So, but yeah, that concludes this part of shock canister assembly, disassembly. And every time, if you go to take these out of the car, let's say this is installed, you're going to disassemble it, depressurize, and then disconnect. If you disconnect this while it's pressurized, the canister you can depressurize, but now the shock and the shock line is pressurized, and you're not going to get this back together. I can get this back together. Most other people aren't going to get this back together. And then they want to take this fitting off down here that says, do not remove. As soon as you take this fitting off, you got air in there, you're done. You got to send the shocks back to us or to MCS, and we have to disassemble them, fill them, and re-bleed them, which, sure, it's not a complicated procedure, but that is a lot of downtime. So always depressurize, then disconnect, reconnect, and then repressurize.
And there you have it. A complete deep dive into transforming this Porsche 991 GT3 with the full suspension suite Dundon has to offer. We covered a ton, from the disassembly to those crucial tips and tricks for a smooth installation. Remember, all those torque specs we mentioned are listed down in the description for your reference. We also tackled some of your most common questions about our suspension components and those fantastic MCS dampers. Hopefully this helps you get your project dialed in perfectly. If you found this video helpful, please smash that like button. Tell us how we did, and don't forget to hit the bell icon after you subscribe. If you got questions, ask us live every Friday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And visit DundonMotorsports.com for all these parts and more. Thanks for wrenching with us today. Till next time.